The following program is brought to you in part by the film Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace.
I'm Leon Charney, and this is the Leon Charney Report coming to you from Jerusalem, Israel, the East Jerusalem side of, and it's pretty pleasant and comfortable today. I'm sitting here with whom I believe is to be one of the most interesting, I don't want to call him a character, but one of the most interesting personalities that I know since I've been coming to Israel. His name is Haim Bar Lev, the former Chief of Staff of the Israeli Defense Forces, the former Minister of Industry and Commerce, now the Minister of Police. As you know, we have done a two-part series on the Israeli police, and we're going to discuss many things with the police, not commissioner, but the police minister today. But more than that, Haim Bar Lev has contributed so much to the country. The insiders in this country say that Haim Bar Lev was the true hero of the Yom Kippur War, when Golda Meir called him back and asked him to take basically the command of the north, and then he ran down to the south and put things under control there. I don't know how many people in America know this much about Haim Bar Lev. We are going to try and illuminate his career for you this afternoon. Haim, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
First question, which is on everybody's mind, Intifada, is it going to continue?
Well, the Intifada is a real uprise of the population, and it seems to me that to bring it down totally, you have to have a political solution. By force, we can control it, and we are controlling it pretty effectively. But nevertheless, here and there we have some incidents that are motivated by the uprise of the people. But to bring it down totally, it seems to me that we have to have a political solution which will slowly but effectively eliminate the motives and bring again the situation back to a cooperation and trust between the Palestinians and us. And I just want to emphasize that 2.5 years ago, a Jewish lady from Kfar Saba would go to Kalkilia on a Friday to buy cheaper vegetables without any danger, without any escort. And today, of course, it's not possible. So basically, I believe that there is a chance, provided we find a political solution.
Do you have any ideas what that political solution might be?
Well, it seems to me that a comprehensive peace in this area without the participation of Jordan is not possible. Because in Jordan you have about 2 million Palestinians living. They are half of the Palestinian people, and every solution has to be a solution that would comprise most of the Palestinians. Right now, Jordan is not a partner. The PLO is not a partner because the PLO sees as a solution the creation of a Palestinian state squeezed between Jordan and Israel. And this is neither a solution for the Palestinians, because it would divide the Palestinian people in two sovereign states, half of them in Jordan and half of them in this Palestinian state. And from our point of view, this is not a recipe for a peace. This would continue the tension, this would continue the mistrust, and this would eventually bring a new war. And therefore we are being left with the Palestinians who live in the areas. And the Israeli initiative that calls for an election of the leadership in the areas that would run the lives of the Palestinians in the areas for 3 or 5 years, during which, as I've already mentioned, tension would be released, trust would build up, and the area then would be ripe for a permanent solution. So this is right now the only possible way to move things politically. A permanent solution, I believe, can only be if all the parties are willing to compromise. As long as either Israel or the Arabs, namely the Palestinians or an Arab state, claims we have all the rights and therefore 100% belongs to us, there will be no peace. We cannot force them to make a peace with us on the basis of not an inch, and they cannot force us to make a peace on the basis of going back to the previous, what we call the green line. So for a permanent solution, the basis is the readiness for both parties to be ready to settle, not for the maximum, not for all the dreams and hopes and aspirations, but for what is really vital for everybody. And this would call for a compromise. Today, of course, this is not the question, because we are not talking of a comprehensive peace. We are talking of an interim agreement for a transitional period of 3 or 5 years. But if we surpass this obstacle, I believe that in a few years the situation can be ripe for a real negotiation for a full-fledged peace. But for this, as I've said, we need also our sovereign eastern neighbor, which is Jordan.
Do you think a national unity government could bring about such a comprehensive peace, or would it be preferable to have an adversarial situation with the political parties?
Well, if we take the present attitudes of the two major parties in the government, in the national unity government, then the unity government cannot unite on a permanent peace. We can unite on a interim agreement, on a transitional period. So once we reach, after an interim agreement has been reached, when we get at the end of these 3 to 5 years, I believe that a vast majority of the Israelis will come to reason and will understand that if we want really a peace, we must be ready to compromise.
So the purpose of the interim arrangement is sort of a holding period to adjust the population to the fact that the permanent peace is possible, but not to give them the shock and try to force a peace upon them.
Yes, I believe so.
Haim, you worked very assiduously and helped President Carter and all of us in the Camp David Agreement. At that time, you were a Knesset member and part of the Defense Committee. In your opinion, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you rank the Camp David Peace Treaty? Is it valuable?
No, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Because you see, the peace between us and Egypt is not as between the United States and Canada. But it's a peace. We can go there, and El Al airplane lands every day there. The borders are open. And the peace has proven itself even during the 2 years when we were in Lebanon, deeply involved in Lebanon.
Article 6.
And everybody can easily imagine what would have happened along the Egyptian border had we not had this peace during the Lebanese war. At least we would be forced to keep on the border a few divisions. And the fact is that more than 10 years we didn't have one soldier killed on the Egyptian border. So it is a peace, and I think it has been it is proved that in spite of different crises, we had the Lebanese crisis, we had the crisis over Taba, and now the Intifada is also a problem. For the Arab world, it's a problem. It's not only a problem for the people who live in the area. And the peace is going on. So there is no doubt in my mind that the peace is there to stay, because neither Israel nor Egypt have any motives to start a war. So the Camp David Agreement really broke the cycle of war between us and the Arab countries, and I'm sure that the processes that have started there will continue.
So you give it a 10?
Not a 10, I give it a 7 and 8.
Okay.
Still there is room for improvement, and I hope it will improve.
That leads me to my other question. None of us here predicted, none of us in the world predicted the change so radically in the East and West, especially in Europe. The effect, in your opinion, on Israel or the Middle East of this new semi-alliance between the United States and the Soviet Union?
It's a very positive development, not only on the worldwide sphere, but on our small stage. It's a very positive development because, first of all, the Arab countries, right now Syria, that has up to the last year been supported by the Soviet Russia and armed by the Soviet Russia. They got a military support of about $3 billion at that time. And the PLO was also encouraged by the Russians and supported with every extreme demand, with every extreme position. This has changed in the last few months. And therefore, I think that a danger of war has reduced here in this area due to the rapprochement between the United States and the Soviet Union. And more than that, the changes in the eastern countries, the political changes, the liberalization, the more democratic tendencies everywhere, they have also an influence in the countries in the Middle East that are basically countries of a strong ruler. For instance, a fantastic thing has happened just a week ago. In Jordan, there was a motion of inconfidence to the government.
No confidence.
Of no confidence in the parliament.
Right.
This is a development that in no Arab countries ever occurred before. So it has its effect. Of course, it's a slow process, but also from the point of view of the different countries and their attitude toward the possibility of finding solutions not only in the battlefield, I think it's a positive development, definitely.
We're going to hold for a commercial break and be back in 2 minutes with Haim Bar Lev, the illustrious, I think, unsung hero of the State of Israel.
In modern Middle East history, only one peace treaty has stood the test of time, the 1978 Camp David Accord. In the new documentary film, Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace, learn the true story behind the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time and its lessons for the future.
The price of peace is very high. To have this courageous man and my close friend killed.
Winner of the Telly Award for Best Cultural Program. Now available at select stores including Barnes & Noble and online at Amazon.com. Now get the book the hit movie was based on, Leon Charney's Backdoor Channels. Learn about the backdoor channel negotiations that led to the historic 1978 Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty. Become a witness to history and order Backdoor Channels online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Also available at all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at iTunes or Audible.com. Relive history. Order Backdoor Channels. Leon Charney sets out to discover the true meaning of the Kaddish, the Jewish custom of reciting a prayer to commemorate the death of a close relative. Join Charney as he finds out the history of the Kaddish and how it has evolved. Reviewed as a refreshing walk through Jewish history and a book that deserves to be read by both Jews and non-Jews, The Mystery of the Kaddish is now available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at Audible.com or on iTunes. Discover the mystery of the Kaddish. Get best-selling author Leon Charney's latest book, The Battle of the Two Talmuds. Join Charney as he explores years of Jewish history to find out why and how Talmudic scholars and rabbis abandoned the Holy Land for the lands of the diaspora. Learn about the power struggles behind the creation of the Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmuds. It's a book critics call engaging and enlightening. A book which will be of interest to people of every faith. Now available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, or download the audiobook of The Battle of the Two Talmuds at iTunes or Audible.com.
I am Chief of Staff of the Army, Commerce Minister, Secretary General of the Labor Party, Police Minister. What was your most exciting, what was the most exciting thing that happened to you since the creation of the State of Israel?
Well, the most exciting thing was the creation of the state.
Where were you?
I was commanding a battalion, a so-called battalion, along the Egyptian border. And we had about a dozen of small settlements from the Gaza Strip, from Rafah, down to the east in Nevatim, which is southeast of Beersheba. And we had about 300 soldiers, Palmach people. In every settlement we had a platoon. And on the 15th of May, 48, we knew that the Egyptians are going to invade the country and attack us. And we knew that they had all the means of war. They had tanks, they had armored cars, they had artillery, they had Spitfires, fighter planes. And we didn't have but light weapons, rifles, a few machine guns, and only 2 medium machine guns from World War I. A Schwarzlose with water cooling, and in the whole battalion we had 2 3-inch mortars. And when on the 15th of May in the morning the Egyptians started to attack, first of all they bombed the kibbutz, the settlement near Rafah, kibbutz Nirim. Then they shelled it. In the meanwhile, they had a battalion parade about 3 kilometers from the kibbutz, out of the range of our weapons, and they started to attack it. And immediately the communication with the kibbutz stopped because of the shelling. And I, as battalion commander, didn't have anything almost nothing to help them.
What was your rank at that time?
I was a major, a battalion commander.
A young major.
Well, 24, it's not so young. But as a battalion commander, I had very little force that I could send to aid this kibbutz. I remember 2 command cars with 20 people. So I made a counter-attack, and on the wireless, on the radio, I made a bluff. I said that the mobile forces are going to attack, etc., etc. But the whole settlement was covered with smoke, and there was no communication, and I didn't know what actually happened and how this settlement is going to withhold or stand such an attack of a whole battalion with the support of 2 batteries of 25-pounders artillery pieces. And when the day was over, and I learned that they had 6 killed, but around the settlement, tens of Egyptian bodies were scattered. The Egyptians didn't manage to enter into the kibbutz, and the kibbutz was able to, the settlement was able to defend itself. At that moment, I knew that we are going to win the war.
Really?
And up to this day, I was not sure. We never had to fight real armies. And it was a big question mark how these settlements with 30 boys and girls, with the 30 rifles and 1 machine gun, would able to fight against an attack of a well-equipped army. But at the end of this first day, when it was clear that we made it, I felt that we are going to make it. And of course, we had problems in the War of Independence, and not everything was always very smooth and easy. But basically, after this first day of battle in the war, I was sure that that the Jewish population in Palestine will be able to defend itself.
Chaim, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in reading your history, in 1967, you were in France and you were called back for the war. In 1973, you were outside officially of the Army. I think you were in reserve part of the Army, and then you were called back by Golda Meir. So two of the maybe strongest or most important wars, I guess they're all important. You were basically outside, then you came inside and took control of two situations. And I think no place in Israeli history has a human being been involved from the outside to the inside. How did this happen? I mean, you were in France in '67?
Yes, I was studying in France, and when on the 15th of May, '67, Nasser of Egypt closed the Straits of Tiran, of the Red Sea, I cabled to the Chief of Staff, to Yitzhak Rabin, that I'm ready to come back.
You were in school then?
Yes, I studied in France, and Yitzhak Rabin answered me, okay, you wait, if we'll need you, we'll call you. And on the 23rd of May, he called me and I came, and I became
his deputy?
Yes, Deputy Chief of Staff.
And you replaced Ezer Weitzman at that time?
No, Ezer Weitzman was the chief of the operations and training, and I became a deputy. At that time we didn't have a deputy chief of staff, so I was in charge of, I was number 2 in the army.
I interviewed Rabin a couple of months ago, and he told me the most exciting experience of his life in Israel was the Six-Day War and the capture of Jerusalem. Would you share that emotion?
Yes. Well, I was with the forces who came to the Wailing Wall. The brigade commander was Mota Gur,
who later became defense chief.
He became chief of staff. He's now minister of, without a portfolio. I joined his brigade, and I came to the wall, to the Wailing Wall, with the first paratroopers. It was really a very, very exciting moment. And one of the most exciting moments in my life, of course.
Aside from your marriage.
Yes.
Chaim, 73, what happened? I know you were a minister at that point?
Yes.
And outside of the army?
Yes, I was minister. And on the second day of the war, namely on Sunday, the 7th of October, the situation in the north, on the Syrian border, was
catastrophic.
Was very severe, because the Syrians, they attacked with armor. They didn't attack our strongholds, which were too strong for them, but they came with their armors between the positions, and they came more or less into half the way between the line, the front line, and the Jordan River. And Golda Meir, and there were ideas to withdraw and to get in a defense line along the Jordan River. And Golda Meir asked me if I was ready to go there and to see if really this is the only option. And I said, I'm willing to go, but I want, of course, the defense minister and the chief of staff to want me to go. And both of them, namely Moshe Dayan and General David Elazar, who was the chief of staff, they were definitely, they agreed So I went to the north.
Did you have a commission at that point? Did you have authority? Or you were an advisor?
Well, I didn't have any official position, but it was about a year, about less than 2 years since I was chief of staff. Everybody knew me, and they accepted.
Did you wear a uniform?
No, at that time, no. And I came, and I saw the situation, and I came to the conclusion that there is no reason for us to withdraw and get a defense line on the Jordan River. I was sure that we can hold the position and attack and make a counterattack, which we did on Tuesday morning. And then I came back, and a day later, the chief of staff initiated my mobilization in uniform.
And then you became an officer.
And I became the commander of the Southern Front, which was of the Egyptian front, which was also in a very tough situation. The Egyptians were with 5 divisions along the Suez Canal on our side. And we had heavy casualties.
Was that a precedent in the history of Israeli military where a chief of staff is remobilized and called back to serve as an active commander?
Yes, but in '67, Moshe Dayan, before he became defense minister, he volunteered to become the commander of the Southern Front.
And then Eshkol brought him back as a defense.
And then Eshkol brought him as Minister of Defense. So he had the intention, but it didn't materialize. In my case, it also materialized. But by the way, you know that surprise in war gives a tremendous advantage to the party that surprises, and the party that is surprised has to improvise. And in the Yom Kippur War, nothing, absolutely nothing, didn't work according to a plan, a pre-plan, including the chain of command. I became the commander of the Egyptian front. As my air advisor, I had Moti Hod, who was the previous commander of the Air Force. So that not only the operational plans didn't work as pre-planned, but also the chain of command was improvised. And I believe that the biggest test, the biggest challenge for any army is to improvise in a way when you are surprised that will finally bring you to a position where you can take the initiative. And this was the case in the Yom Kippur War. We were surprised, and the first few days were very tough, and the initiative was not ours, but we managed to, in spite of the surprise, by improvisations, to turn the tide.
I am men like Uri Ben Ori, who was a general, and Musa Peled, who was a general up in the north, and a lot of people that I have spoken to call you the general's general. That they call you a very brave man. What makes a man a great general, in your opinion?
Well, it's a question of character. a question of knowledge. You have to know quite some things. It's not just a question of character. And it takes also experience, because experience, if you learn from it properly, can help you in many situations.
I'm sure you've studied and read about MacArthur and Rommel and Eisenhower. Do you have any opinions about these people?
Of course, all of them were good generals.
Is it the leadership ability? Is that people will follow them?
Leadership is one of the necessary qualities, because if people do not follow you, you can be an advisor, but you cannot lead them into battle.
Let me throw some names at you and give me your opinion. Ben-Gurion.
Ben-Gurion was well, it's hard to believe, but he was a man with vision and with some
ability to be a prophet?
Yes. Well, I'll tell you, I already told you about the situation along the Egyptian line in the War of Independence. And during the first armistice, no, during the first ceasefire in June '48, some rumors came to the Negev in the south that at the headquarters they contemplate a plan of shortening the lines, namely of giving up the Negev, of forming a line approximately where today is Ashkelon and Bet Jubrin. And the civilians in the Negev, they decided to send a mission, a committee to Ben-Gurion to ask for either a reinforcement of the forces in the Negev, or if they decided to shorten the lines, then to evacuate them immediately without letting them just fade away. So they organized a committee of civilians, of the kibbutznikim, and they went to Tel Aviv to meet Ben-Gurion. Of course, they didn't make an appointment in advance. They came to his office, and he was in a big meeting, so he sent his aide to ask the people from the Negev what's the problem. And when they told his aide, Nehemiah Argov, the late Nehemiah Argov, Nehemiah Argov came to them and he said, Ben-Gurion cannot come and see you right now, but he got the message and he'll write you an answer. So they came back to the Negev, and everybody was waiting for an answer. And a few days later, really, the answer came in writing. And Ben-Gurion writes to the Chaverim from the Negev. He says, a human being cannot foresee what will be, or he cannot state clearly what lies ahead. But I can tell you what I think that will happen and what we want to happen. Beersheba will be the capital of the Negev. And at that time, Beersheba was in Egyptians' hand. The Egyptian army was in Beersheba. Beersheba was a Bedouin village of 3,000 Bedouins. Eilat will become the southern port of Israel, and around Eilat will have a developed agricultural area, developed farms and agricultural kibbutzim. You know, we got the answer and we thought, well, he lives on Olympus. Because at that time, nobody was in Eilat. We knew it's somewhere in the south, at the top of the Negev. But, you know, in June 48, to imagine that really in Eilat will happen what actually happened. So people say, well, what can you do? He lives on Olympus. And, you know, a year later, it really happened.
Prophecy came true. You told me yesterday you also prophesied that the East-West would come together within 25 years.
Yeah, this is another prophecy, yes.
We'll be back in 2 minutes after a commercial break with Haim Bar Lev, the police minister of Israel and former chief of the Israeli Defense Forces.
In modern Middle East history, only one peace treaty has stood the test of time, the 1978 Camp David Accord. In the new documentary film, Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace, learn the true story behind the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time and its lessons for the future.
The price of peace is very high. To have this courageous man and my close friend killed.
Winner of the Telly Award for Best Cultural Program. Now available at select stores including Barnes & Noble and online at Amazon.com. Now get the book the hit movie was based on, Leon Charney's Backdoor Channels. Learn about the Backdoor Channel negotiations that led to the historic 1978 Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty. Become a witness to history and order Backdoor Channels online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Also available at all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at iTunes or Audible.com. Relive history. Order Backdoor Channels. Leon Charney sets out to discover the true meaning of the Kaddish, the Jewish custom of reciting a prayer to commemorate the death of a close relative. Join Charney as he finds out the history of the Kaddish and how it has evolved. Reviewed as a refreshing walk through Jewish history and a book that deserves to be read by both Jews and non-Jews, The Mystery of the Kaddish is now available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at Audible.com or on iTunes. Discover the mystery of the Kaddish. Get best-selling author Leon Charney's latest book, The Battle of the Two Talmuds. Join Charney as he explores years of Jewish history to find out why and how Talmudic scholars and rabbis abandoned the Holy Land for the lands of the diaspora. Learn about the power struggles behind the creation of the Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmuds. It's a book critics call engaging and enlightening. A book which will be of interest to people of every faith. Now available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, or download the audiobook of The Battle of the Two Talmuds at iTunes or Audible.com.
Back with Haim Bar Lev, whom I consider one of the most fascinating personalities in Israel. He may disagree, but we'll fight over it sometime over lunch. In any case, Chaim, Ben-Gurion's prophecy on the East-West relationships in a Look magazine article, I think, wasn't it?
Oh, yes. He was asked by the Look editor in 1962 to try to explain what he thinks will happen in 25 years from then. And among other things, he said that there will be a change in the regimes of the Soviet Union and Eastern countries, because human beings are born to be free, and the radical regimes cannot last forever. He said that there will be a rapprochement between East and West, that the United States will become more and more a welfare state. What can this is what he said.
Tell us to my American audience.
Well, and he also said that between Israel and Arabs, things will also alleviate and move towards peace.
Is Menachem Begin, your opinion?
Well, Menachem Begin is definitely a leader. I think that his upbringing was so that he was in the chains of his party's opinion, namely he couldn't
vary the doctrine?
Yes, of the importance of the territory. Namely, for the revisionists, for his party, the most important thing is the whole of Israel, namely the territory. With us, with the labor movement, for us, the main thing is the society, the Israeli society.
Interesting differential.
Well, yeah. And Begin was totally in the hands of this philosophy, and some of his followers continue. But as a personality, he is a very decent person, and he's a leader, no doubt about it. He led his movement from a minority to a majority.
All right, Golda Meir.
Golda Meir was an extraordinary person. You see, she was a grandmother and she was a woman. And I was with Golda a part of the time I was chief of staff, and a part of the time I was minister. And as chief of staff, it was a part of the war of attrition when I was chief of staff and she was the prime minister. And it was amazing how a lady at that age was able to grasp professional questions. And she had a strong character. She was convinced in her attitudes. And she led Israel through quite a few years of very, very tough decisions. The War of Independence, the years after that. I know that some people accuse her of missing a possibility of peace.
A lot of people are critical of that.
Yes. I definitely think that they are wrong, because what Egypt suggested in 1971, 72 was not a peace. It was an end of belligerency in turn of a full withdrawal of Israel, not only on the Egyptian front, but everywhere, including Jerusalem, including the Golan Heights. And we were lucky that, to my mind, that we had Golda Meir at that time, who was capable of really coping with the pressure and convincing not only the government but also the people that what is proposed to us is not a peace. Today it's very easy to say, after we have a peace with Egypt, that we could have reached it in 71 or 72. But Egypt at that time was not ripe for a full peace. Egypt was ripe after the Yom Kippur War. And by the way, when late Sadat came to Israel, the labor movement, we were in opposition, but nevertheless our faction met with him, and Golda met with him, and then Sadat turned to Golda and said, Now we can talk as equals. There is no winner and no loser among us. And before the Yom Kippur War, Egypt was not right. Egypt still thought that she might solve the problem in the battlefield. And the Yom Kippur War was such that Egypt came to the conclusion that on one hand, in the battlefield, she cannot solve the problem, and on the other hand, Egypt came out of this war, as Sadat said, not as a winner, not as a loser. And only then Egypt was ripe for a peace. And Egypt was lucky to have a leader like Sadat, who was able to do it.
We're going to break for a commercial and wrap it up. We're going to ask Haim Bar Lev about his opinion of two other people, Moshe Dayan and Pinchas Sapir, and what he foresees the future of Israel 20 years from now. And we're going to close, but we'll break for a commercial. We'll be back in 1 minute.
In modern Middle East history, only one peace treaty has stood the test of time, the 1978 Camp David Accord. In the new documentary film, Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace, learn the true story behind the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time and its lessons for the future.
The price of peace is very high. To have this courageous man and my close friend killed.
Winner of the Telly Award for Best Cultural Program. Now available at select stores including Barnes & Noble and online at Amazon.com. Now get the book the hit movie was based on, Leon Charney's Backdoor Channels. Learn about the backdoor channel negotiations that led to the historic 1978 Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty. Become a witness to history and order Backdoor Channels online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Also available at all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at iTunes or Audible.com. Relive history. Order Backdoor Channels. Leon Charney sets out to discover the true meaning of the Kaddish, the Jewish custom of reciting a prayer to commemorate the death of a close relative. Join Charney as he finds out the history of the Kaddish and how it has evolved. Reviewed as a refreshing walk through Jewish history and a book that deserves to be read by both Jews and non-Jews, The Mystery of the Kaddish is now available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at Audible.com or on iTunes. Discover the mystery of the Kaddish. Get best-selling author Leon Charney's latest book, The Battle of the Two Talmuds. Join Charney as he explores years of Jewish history to find out why and how Talmudic scholars and rabbis abandoned the Holy Land for the lands of the diaspora. Learn about the power struggles behind the creation of the Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmuds. It's a book critics call engaging and enlightening. A book which will be of interest to people of every faith. Now available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, or download the audiobook of The Battle of the Two Talmuds at iTunes or Audible.com.
Haim, Moshe Dayan.
Moshe Dayan was a fascinating person. I think that Moshe Dayan is the only person that I know on whom you can say, you can define him in every way and you'll be right. In every way.
It's good for a poker game. You can't lose.
But I worked with him. I was his chief of staff, namely number 2, when he was the commander of the Northern Command. And I worked 4 years as chief of staff when he was the Minister of Defense. And it was an experience, really, it was fascinating to work with him.
Sapir.
Sapir is a different story. Sapir was an idealist, a Zionist, a very able person, a very modest person.
Ben-Gurion prophecy.
Well, I'm not Ben-Gurion.
But you're Bar Lev. About how you see Israel 20 years from now.
Well, I'm sure that 20 years from now we'll have normal relations with our neighbors. We'll have peace. I believe that Jordan is ready now. I believe that Syria has to free herself from the Ba'ath philosophy of La Grande Syrie, Greater Syria, including Lebanon and the north of Jordan, and of course Palestine. But in 20 years these things will change, and we'll have a population of I believe 6, 7, 8 million people, and produce and live in peace.
So you're hopeful, and you believe that your grandchildren will have basically a peaceful existence?
Yes, I believe so.
We're going to close. We appreciate your time, Haim, and I'm sorry to tell you this because I know you're modest, but to me you're one of the most fascinating men of this country. We'll see you next week with another report from the Leon Charney Report, and we wish you all a good Sunday.